Hello, good afternoon and welcome to SHOWstudio. Today we're here to discuss Valentino Haute Couture Spring Summer 2018. I am surrounded by a foursome who I really think cover four angles of the fashion industry. They're all experts, and I should of course say I am Rosanna Falconer. Now I will let them introduce themselves, starting with Oriole, to my left.
I'm Oriole Cullen and I'm a fashion curator at the V&A Museum.
Which way are we going? My way. I'm Woodward and I'm brand director of Zandra Rhodes.
I'm Navaz Batliwalla. I'm a freelance editorial consultant and author, and I write the blog Disney Roller Girl.
I'm Amelie Hegardt and I work as a fashion illustrator.
Fantastic, thank you all. So I think I want to begin today. Pierpaolo Piccioli has now been at the helm as sole creative director of Valentino for over 18 months. I feel like he's really got his feet under the table now. The brand is doing very well both commercially and creatively, although obviously that's what we're here to discuss today. And it has been very interesting to see him take the brand from something that really is the pinnacle of romantic femininity, the fairy tale, and push it into a multifaceted, modern aesthetic and appealing to that consumer. So I want to look at how that would apply to couture, and if that even works in couture, or if it's better suited to ready-to-wear. Last year, he said, "You can't design clothes with your eyes. You can't design clothes with your eyes closed to what's happening around you." What is contemporaneity? It's the mix of the high and the low, the balancing of the different layers. I think it's very interesting that the creative director of Valentino has said that. Valentino is a brand that historically was the upper echelon of glamour and very far removed from the mundane, everyday. Now, I think it's highly relevant that he said this, and I think it speaks volume for the brand and its modern consumer. Grace, I'm going to turn to you. You are brand director at Zandra Rhodes. Obviously, Zandra has history with Valentino, but also I think she has, and you work on very beautiful, feminine, traditional aesthetics of that kind of romantic vision. What is your opinion of where he's taking it and where he's taking couture?
I think it was a really interesting move for him to commission Zandra Rhodes to do prints for his first Spring-Summer 17 collection. I think that they researched, obviously hugely, into the parallels between her known as I think it's a bit of a misnomer, but as the punk princess, and the flowing chiffon. And so very soon after he collaborated with Zandra, there was a campaign of pink is punk, so I think appealing to the millennials more. I'm wondering if that was it. I'm wondering if it also happened at a time when vêtements was, hitting its pace. There is a lot more T-shirts being sold by Valentino, and there's a lot more sportswear. And I wonder if that was a commercial decision that he made rather than an aesthetic one, or if the aesthetic decision that he made to turn more streetwear was one just to differentiate himself from Maria Grazia.
Very good point. And do you think that we were mentioning downstairs, of course, the logo that he's brought in the last couple of seasons. It was in resort and it was also in menswear, which was on the runway last week. It's the VLTN logo, a real slogan, and he said that he saw it in the 80s and didn't like it then, but now he's really got into it, and also he noticed that the younger members of the atelier loved it. What's your opinion of that? I'm turning to you because I know that you were in the atelier on Sunday on a very special project. So yeah, what do you think about that kind of modern slogan that he's doing?
Well, I'd say I'm quite humble in my opinion when it comes to that bit, but I think it's interesting in terms of it, relevant that he is taking this house into a new era and like a new time that we all need to do, everyone needs to do in this industry anyway. When I was there though, it was very romantic, So I'd say that they still have a very strong connection to the roots of Valentino when I saw what I saw from my perspective. So yeah, I don't know if that's a good answer, but
no, that's also a bit of a preview. Are you allowed to say what you were doing there, or?
Yeah, so I looked at the collection because I did illustration job for them for a magazine in France. So it's very basic. They show you all the collections and all the drawings, and talks to me about the collection, and it's drawn on the Valentino archive quite a lot. Yeah.
And I'm going to turn to you, Navaz, as talking of the archive. Obviously, you as a writer have a kind of a plethora of fashion awareness and fashion knowledge. What is your opinion of this position of creative director when you are obviously taking over from somebody as established as Garifani? How much should one draw on the archives?
Well, I don't think you can really say. I think we've seen so much over the last 10 years with the whole fashion merry-go-round. It tends to be, when they first go in, it tends to be one or the other. They definitely go into the archive from the beginning and make sure they find all those signatures, etc. Or they don't do that straight away. They go in and like completely reinvent it, and then maybe later they bring in the kind of like archive element. So it's one or the other. I guess for Valentino, I think it's quite interesting with Valentino how, you had the split of Maria Grazia Chiuri going one way to an equally iconic couture house, and everyone trying to see the two differences and see who was the romantic one and who was the modern one, and which was which. But yeah, I don't know.
Do you think they had to flip a coin for it? Okay, you get to change, I'll stay. Because it does feel like she carried the romance on, and she's doing it in her own very specific way. They both love a slogan T-shirt now. But it does feel like, that's what I'm saying, is I wonder if this is his natural beast, his natural being is to be more sportswear, if it's just a chosen direction, because it felt right in the whole fashion environment as well.
Well, I mean, I think the interesting thing with that partnership is that they worked together since 1989. So, I mean, they grew up together. So it's understandable how they would have very similar, design signatures as they develop. But also going back to that idea of sort of looking in the archives and referencing that. I mean, Valentino himself is so much a part of this brand. We've seen him coming in today, sitting down, and there was sort of talk about when he left, and initially it was Alessandra Faccinetti, I think, who took over, and she, didn't really get into her stride, and I think apparently it was because she wasn't referencing the archives. So I think that's an interesting thing too, that they had worked there as accessory designers and knew the sort of rhythm of the house. But from very early on, it's the rock stud shoe, which I think is like a little clue that they are adding a sort of slight edge to the kind of romance that they continued on. And I think that was suddenly made people sit up a bit more with Valentino and just think in terms of a fashion accessory and an item. I think that slightly repositioned the brand quite quietly in a way. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the rock stud shoe became iconic with a new generation. And in 2016, they were the most successful. I think it was TechCrunch proclaimed them the most successful of the luxury brands on Instagram. Obviously not just in numbers, but in terms of engagement and comments and variety of content. The rock style is obviously a huge part of that, and I think it's fascinating the way they approach marketing now. They did the campaign for their Resort 18 was with an NBA football player teaching models how to play basketball. I mean, basketball player teaching them how to play basketball, and it was fantastic. Obviously it's a 360 vision, and the collection itself had clear sportswear references, as we're all discussing, and that
which is what didn't work for Raf at Dior.
Yes, of course.
So and now you're seeing many more people employed to be a 360 creative director. If you look at Claire Wright Keller, and you look at Hedi Slimane now going to take couture, menswear and fragrance.
You can't just look at
I think everybody learned
anymore.
from
it needs to be beyond that. Yeah, I think that's very well said. And when it comes to, I mean, nobody's ever going to see, well, perhaps would be proven wrong today, but I would say we're not really going to see a tracksuit on the couture runway. But last season and across the board, I think there has been more separates, more of a slouchiness to trousers perhaps, pockets we're seeing. What are your, I mean, Navaz, you've obviously written the book, The New Garçon, which is all about more of a, I suppose, that you'll describe better than me, but this new tribe of modern gentlewomen. She craves that kind of thing. She can't just live in a ball gown, can she?
Exactly. So it's a woman who.
It's a shame, though, isn't it?
I would.
But you know, women are busy. They have multifaceted lives. They need clothes that work for them. They need pockets. They, you know, they take cues from menswear and they mix menswear and women's wear because menswear is always rooted in functionality, whereas women's wear traditionally is very decorative. And you know, we think of women's wear, it's always about the embroidery and the colours, and it's never about how something is structured and for function, and that's why women love trousers and pockets and all those menswear cues, because we need that stuff as well. And so that woman that I sort of identified and profiled in my book was really, just sort of identifying that lifestyle. The other thing I want to say about the whole sort of like journey of Valentino and the kind of like sportiness and casualness, I think it's not just millennials, it's like the new global customer. And if you think about the Chinese customer, the customer that actually does have money, so like the Chinese millennials, they are the digital native, even more than we are. Like they're so far ahead of us in terms of how they shop and engage with digital content, and how they engage with fashion is very much more digitally than how we do. And I think as that customer matures and goes into their 30s and 40s and really like has their earning power, they are the ones that are leading the game, and the designers and luxury houses really do have to follow where they are.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I'm just looking, no, we're not, I thought we were about to begin. No, of course, I think that's so important to consider this new emerging market. The couture, obviously, it did have a moment. I think the conversation and the polemic, probably if we were discussing this 5 years ago, would be, is couture relevant today? Is it still being bought, or is it just a facade for licensed fragrances and beauty? However, I actually think now that's just, I think it's quite pleasing that that isn't the conversation anymore. Today on the front row, there will no doubt be a huge number of customers of all different ages. In fact, Pierpaolo is very open in the fact that he always says, I don't design for a particular age or tribe of women. I know that a lot of creative directors say that, but I feel particularly for him that's relevant. And I think one has to, as a creative director, consider that new market. Sandra, is it that? I nearly turned to you as Sandra, but Grace.
It's a great impression of her.
But what do you think about the new markets? Do you think that's particularly something, as Navaz says, this is why he's having this new approach to the aesthetic?
I don't know if there are new customers on there, possibly with the burgeoning markets or the new markets, Asian markets, whether there are new customers there, or the fact that this is now just one great big advert. The whole thing, the fact you can live stream it, the fact that it's accessible to their 9.6 million followers on Instagram, and it's just content, and people have to create content all the time. So why not make a couture show the fantasy that you want? So it doesn't really matter if they have new customers. It doesn't really matter if the customers are dying out, because this is still a thing. This is like, it's
a premiere
new show. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's their absolute kind of branding heaven.
They did some fantastic social media stories today, both on Facebook and on Instagram. I really liked the
not petit
byline
main
of them. Yeah, not petit main. Don't call them. The byline was, "Don't call them petit main." There are some big personalities in the atelier, and they were beautifully shot with a really epic soundtrack, profiling seamstresses. Here we go. Seamstresses and tailors in the atelier of all different ages, and their stories, and they talk about their first day at the atelier. It shows there is so much passion behind this brand. I found it fascinating to watch, and we were saying earlier today on the panel about Margiela with Colin McDowell that couture, if it's anything, it's the story, and it's so important to convey that all of this life behind
I think it's the story and the craftsmanship, and I know that whenever I've put like a Dior couture video on my Facebook, posted it on my Disney World Girl Facebook, it gets loads of engagement. Like, people are just mesmerised by that kind of skill and craftsmanship. And so, yes, the stories of who these people are, but what they do, it's a very romantic idea that someone spends, you know, they always seem to highlight the person that's been there for 25 years.
Yeah, and then the new rock and roll guy who got the big soundtrack on this. I was like, whoa.
But actually, you always see that
It's like really hot as well.
It's always, I don't know if you found this, but it's always a mix of like people that've been there for a long time. But there's always loads of young people there, like students.
I know, I noticed
It's
that.
a mix.
Yeah, yeah.
But I thought that's what we talked about before, right? When I went to all the ateliers of the weekend, it was just so, in a way, I always find that being futuristic, because if you go into an office where you don't have any screens, but everyone is engaged with their hands, you just cross over this fantastic atmosphere. It's incredible. And you have women who's worked for 35 years, and then you have young women or men. I mean, it's a mixture of all these fantastic craft. I mean, they're making their craft to the fullest, and it's so mesmerizing. And so I was like, of course, because they're not anywhere else. They're not on their phones or their screens, but they're just there. Focused on
their
every
creativity.
detail. And I thought, in a way, like, I hope it's a glimpse into future. You know, we get the attention to our hands again. You know,
we hand silk screen print and make everything in our atelier in Bermondsey, and we're the only brand that does it. But the price point reflects that. And so trying to get that over to people. So couture is this world that we're all like, well, I can never afford couture, but somebody can somewhere. The focus on trying to get people to look at something that's made by hand and appreciate it is an uphill struggle, because people generally are, is it the right price and does it make me look good? Because that's what the fallout, when the bottom financially has fallen out of what something costs. This is so far away from the public, it doesn't kind of relate. You know, so it's trying to get that couture sensibility back into fashion, which is why I love this. It's why that it's those films, you know, Chanel do them so well, and they are just dreamy. You're just watching, literally you could feel the spark of energy coming out as people, you know, make the pieces. And I think it's such an important part of our industry to understand that things are crafted by people, and that's why I'm glad to see this.
Yeah, and for the consumer to understand that. Oriole, at the V&A, you must have access to a cornucopia of couture, but from over the years. Do you think the techniques have changed
I mean,
a lot?
Actually, it's amazing. The skill is really still there. The interesting thing is we're so sort of image-based now. What's missing is the object, in a way. You know, it's great that the sort of couture houses have realised this, and they're rolling out films about what goes on behind the scenes, because, you know, when you're looking at an image, you can't really tell whether something's ready to wear or couture. You know, if you're watching the show, why is this special? So it's fantastic that they're sort of using that and pushing it out, but there's still a disconnect, because until you actually open up the inside of the garments and see all of the hand stitching, and, you know, it's incredible. And then thinking about the processes, because the other thing for these couture houses is, of course, the clients, and they put a lot of time and effort into entertaining their clients, giving them special events, etc. But also these mostly women come for fittings, you know, regularly, and you have to do that multiple times. So to be a couture customer is quite a commitment too. I mean, obviously, you know, wonderful position to be in. So, yeah, I mean, we're incredibly lucky in the museum that we have the actual objects, and, you know, to be able to see. I think it's inside for me is the real sort of revelation when you can see that. But we did. Recently, we have two wonderful ladies who work with us, who worked in the couture trades and are now volunteers. And this new film, Phantom Thread, with Paul Thomas Anderson, Daniel Day-Lewis, they came to do a lot of research at the V&A, and they found Sue and Joan working away there, and they were just mesmerised, and asked them could they be in the film, and then they were getting talking parts, and every sort of interview now refers to them. And I was watching the trailer, and I was like, they're in every shot. So, but it was magnificent, because I spoke to someone recently who works in the industry, and they were saying, oh, I saw the film, and those ladies really seemed to know what they were doing. And I was like, that's because they do, you know. So it's interesting who people notice, you know, that skill and that level.
I wonder if fashion courses have become less focused on craft.
Definitely.
And it's more about how do you make an Instagrammable collection?
Marketing.
And it's much less, it's much more about how you come out to great big applause than making something that's just really beautifully made. I wonder how many people are actually studying couture.
Well, the technicians, I think, at the fashion colleges are always the unsung heroes because over the last 20 years, particularly, there's been more and more reliance on them to actually execute garments.
Collections.
It's just practicality too of what can be taught, and the colleges want people to be employable at the end of the day. So. This is a very particular skill, and I think also it's very behind the scenes. It's a different thing to want to be a designer with your own label or working designing for a house than be behind the scenes in an atelier. It's a different.
Yeah, well, I think we're in a culture of me.
Star.
I want to be the star.
Turn,
Yeah.
And even if you love being behind the scenes like we do, it's not encouraged.
Yeah.
I would like
Be
being
your
behind the scenes.
brand.
I'm always being pushed out to do stuff like this.
Like today.
But I think that's the 15 minutes of fame culture that we are still in. We've been in this culture for quite a while.
I don't think it's going to get much better.
But it's true, though. I have to say, having seen and also met all these lovely people working on their dresses, and Chanel, each and everyone has their one item. And I was thinking about students, that it is a lot of, me and wanting, you have to see it, you want to have your own brand. It's immediately about this whole concept rather than the craft.
There must be I would imagine you'd have to do an apprenticeship for couture. You can't just learn couture techniques at St. Martin's.
Well, most of the ones, certainly in the Valentino Maison film today, it was kind of their first job and they worked their way up. And I think in one
Oh, look, I think we're up. It's gone dark.
It's our moment, or rather, Valentino's moment. I know that we have audio too, don't we? Great.
Oh, the music I always find so important to get into the mood.
So important.
Unusually but sometimes I'm like, oh. There's been a lot of feathers actually.
Yeah, I thought that as well.
Plumes.
I wonder if they're ethical.
Right, exactly what I thought.
Well, there we go, pockets straight away.
And a kind of, tank top. It's like with a very Anna Piaggi style coat.
Are you drawing it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You're drawing it in your head?
In my head, yeah. I mean, this is obviously. Now I know David Danton is in there, and he's like the master. But
This is David Danton.
Yeah. But of course, as an illustrator, like volume and big shapes.
This is a
and
gift
colour,
for you, right?
It's very
It's
nice.
gorgeous.
Now, I know it's hard to comment with it live, but are there any, obviously the palette we're seeing straight away, and separates, just as we were saying earlier, actually, this is all coming through.
The signature cape, I think that must be one of his, because the cape has been a real thing for them for quite a while.
Yeah.
It's interesting with the volumes and this, it's very Balenciaga-esque, Cristobal Balenciaga.
Yes.
I think there's the first
Yeah,
tape
of
that came
course.
through, big volume. And,
But also, does that refer to Saint Laurent last season as well? Was that a game changer with that crazy amount of volume and where to put it on the body? Maybe that was a seismic change.
I love the flash of linings and the flash of colour. There's one look which we saw, which was on first inspection just camel, and then there's a flash of
The
colour.
green at the back, the satin bow,
I think we can also safely say that if this were a ready-to-wear show, the first looks would obviously be based around day wear. They do typically have that look, and here we do have the separates, but it's worn with a feather hat, it's worn with a cocktail, gorgeous silk satin top. It does have the glamour slant still, and that's a clear differentiator for me.
I always think it's really important to see it moving, whether you're there. Obviously, ideally you're there with, like you said, the music and everything.
Don't get
and to see it like this, or even on an Instagram story, it's you feel like you're right in there. And then when you see those front-facing,
They just don't give it
they're
to
just
you.
so flat.
I would always encourage, if anybody's watching this, to not look at the stills, like looking at the Givenchy Couture, Claret Keller's first collection, compared to the moving ones, you just didn't get it. The light wasn't
the
slightly
pleats,
right.
didn't she? And you need to see them move.
This colour is reminding me of Dries and
Yeah, I think.
The colours are a little bit, for me, a little bit Rafford.
Yeah, that's right.
Slash
Yeah.
Dior, that particular.
that particular Dior time, yeah.
And a bit of Galliano in terms of like the...
Not the cyber dog that we saw this week, though. No, not that one.
totally not that.
Well, that was all sorts of colours, depending on whether you used your iPhone camera flash. Yeah, I don't want to call, I'm finding it hard to know what to call that colour. I don't really want to say camel or beige, because that immediately makes me think of...
There's a little blue tint in that.
yeah, there is.
Of that.
Café crème, is that too
I think
brown?
that's a description. What were you going to say, Navaz?
Well, I just find that the models don't walk very well in these shows that I've been watching recently. Do you know what I mean? They're so young and they just kind of walk like they're walking for a bus. And I feel like it misses that kind of...
And that's what you don't get in the photography. That's, but...
Yeah, that's true.
But are you sort of thinking, well, would Stella Tennant just absolutely rock this because she has it? And Valentino always cast very young, I think. Very young.
Yeah.
I love the lipstick. I really like those colours.
I think this is definitely more glamour than romanticism.
Yes,
It's a departure.
it's not those Edwardian long shapes with the high collars, but I think but that's in the air.
Yeah.
So it shows that he's not just designing in a vacuum for himself. I've seen this in not in just couture but ready to wear as well.
Yeah.
And the original brief, so Valentino Garavani always said, my aim is to make women look beautiful. And I think the house got known, what with Valentino Red and everything, as a house of glamour. So as I said at the beginning, up the upper echelon of glamour. So this is very in keeping with the archives, as you were saying, Amelie.
I'm quite relieved.
No, I think it was never like I said, it was never going to be pushed to a sportswear extreme. I think that has its place in the pre-collections, and there were definite elements in last week's menswear show, but this is another thing altogether.
It just looks very modern with these kind of big voluminous shapes and block colours. They're really strong and quite different, I think. He did, at the beginning, one of the looks was his sort of signature long dress, but it was completely nude, sort of.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting.
I saw
It was like a
something
clean panel.
shine. Oh, is that? Yeah, that sequins.
Yeah.
I thought it might have been PVC.
That's a little bit Julia Roberts' Pretty Woman red Valentino dress. Was that red? Can we check if that is a red Valentino dress, or have I just made a mistake? But yeah, that is Valentino red right there. Yeah, the shapes, a lot of them are more relaxed, that bit looser.
Yeah, that's very signature. It's like Vampire's Wife. All sorts of influences.
Oriole, you mentioned earlier you haven't yet done a fashion in motion with Valentino at the V&A, have you?
No, we haven't.
But have you included the designs in any recent exhibitions?
I mean, there was a wonderful dress from the Wunderkammer collection that they did that was in the Glamour of Italian Fashion, which they donated. So that was sort of the last piece, I think, of Valentino Couture that we had on display. But it's really a lovely sort of addition to the collection. But yeah, I mean, we have a nice collection of pieces, but you know, it's very hard to keep up season after season with everything. But yeah, they were fabulous.
The volume seems very new for me, definitely.
And those sashes, quite
Very Sandra Rhodes.
yeah, exactly. The satin
As
sash.
demonstrated beautifully by you today.
On a personal note, it's so bizarre to see these girls because they're so young in real life, and when you see them walking in like this, it's like.
Of course,
yeah,
you see them turn up in their Uggs and skinny jeans, and then you're like,
so
oh, they're
young.
like
Yeah. And
duchesses
it's like,
now.
oh God.
So were they there for fittings on Sunday, or was it a preview?
It was, I think it was a combination of casting and fitting, yeah. But it was the same at in Chanel and Dior. So they, I mean, everything seems to be. It was very calm in each house, but you know, very last minute, I thought. So you know, but it's interesting to see this and compare to the Dior collection.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Well, I mean, on what levels? Obviously, the Dior set, I think, was, with all its surrealism influences, it was so striking. What other aesthetic elements would you say are very strikingly different?
Well, I feel that this one is more kind of like blousy and just very kind of like, to me, reinforcing that couture like on another level. I mean, saying that Dior was very beautiful and very kind of elegant and glamorous as well, but slightly more understated in some ways.
But to me, it felt like there's the temptation with Chanel and Dior to do a gimmick, you know, and it felt the whole surrealist thing became like a, and also the way that she's designed, you know, like the beret, or that she has a thing and it becomes a theme, and whereas this is couture, this is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And the surrealism,
Like
I felt
those were
like
like
really
props.
over-egged the pudding a bit. I was a bit like, okay, we get it. You
Yeah, I
know.
liked it. I know what you mean. Almost like it didn't need all those.
Yeah.
But the accessories at Dior was incredible. I got to see all the shoes and everything, and just in terms of it being quite sort of, I mean, in that sense, she's keeping it into the figurative and decorative. You know, all the shoes and everything had features, and you know, obviously coming from the theme. But here it's more of a wholeness, isn't it? This one I love.
I just feel like I love all these silhouettes, and I feel like couture lately has been a bit more about simplified and not so much about the silhouettes, so just more about surface design and everything else and styling, etc. And this to me is what couture is.
Yeah. You just want to watch swoony stuff. Like, you know, yeah,
That's what you said earlier, yeah.
To look at it and feel like, how did they do that? What does the pattern look like? Whereas when you see something that's too simplified, it's too much like ready to wear.
It really has a feel of that sort of statement glamour of 80s Valentino couture, you know, the sort of big shapes.
Wow.
Something that's bows.
That's quite strong for them. He's never ever done any headwear before, ever. So this kind of really extreme accessories is interesting. I wonder who did it. I wonder if it's Stephen. That looks like Philip Tracy. Do you remember he did the butterflies on the head, all over the head? Moire. I mean, that's what I love about couture. It's like the fabrics, you look at them and you just know they're super expensive. You just know that there is not going to be a replica of this on the high street or anywhere near any department store soon. It's just fabrics that you can't get cheaply.
Yeah, you can. Colin was saying on the panel this morning that clothes nowadays don't make any sound. This is the
rustle.
Rustle.
And the drama.
Yeah.
Precisely.
It's definitely rusty.
It definitely is, isn't it?
That's such a good comment.
Yeah.
So these days I get annoyed if my clothes make sound.
What way?
Well, I guess my life is, sort of
If
quite
you're in the wrong place.
fast.
Yeah.
And it's just, and you're kind of like, if you're wearing a couture gown and you're going out for the evening, it's all about your senses. But if you're, commuting to work, you're just like, it's one more noise I do not need.
There's a very modern comment right there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly.
I kind of love this sort of underwater feeling of the feathers. They feel like jellyfish and sort of.
I mean, I quite like that it's still got a bit of attitude and that there are lots of pockets and it has got that bit of, I mean, this one's particularly...
Yeah. I've seen a Saint Laurent coat like that, though. But maybe, you know, it could have been a Valentino signature as well. They were probably all at it at some point.
How do you like the music?
Love it. Actually.
Yeah, and I think one would be able to hear the rustle below it, so that's all the better.
I think it's interesting. There's a lot of trousers and vests and really amazing couture coats, and that does give it that edge. It's not ball gowns.
And that is surely when the couture customer isn't attending benefits and galas. In the daytime, I can imagine her in these separates and then throw on a silk taffeta cape for the evening with a marabou feather headpiece.
There's a real ease to this, and I think that is a real achievement. Even the really, really tricky pieces are not like, whoa, would I need dressers for that, you know?
Yeah, no, precisely. All of the models, even though they can't walk that well, as Navaz mentioned, or at least they don't have the swagger of the supermodels, they all look very comfortable in them, I suppose. I love the way there are these gorgeous oversized woolen coats, but then the model turns and you see it's got this huge satin, bright green sash at the back. Really eye-catching, very unique.
Very Italian opera.
Very.
Nobody's smiling.
Well,
I don't know, after some collections you really are just like, you know, really overwhelmed and you can't help but smiling. But it is fashion after all.
And I do think that this does, I mean, look at these two here, this does fulfill the brief that you mentioned at the beginning, Grace, of the fairy tale and wanting to be seduced.
I think it's a clever collection because the first few looks, it just looks so relevant, but you still have your kind of, as you say, the romantic ball gowns are there.
It's very well balanced. And it's not, you know, an acid lime green tulle kind of bed that we saw earlier in the week, you know. There are twists, those modern acid colours, like you said, but just not...
But they still look, they feel Valentino. It's not sort of,
I wonder if there's still, as there's only one red exit, I think there has been one red dress in all of the collections.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a fact.
Yeah.
But I think they always put at least one red exit in there.
Yeah, I think that's the pattern too. I think so. There he is.
Super cash.
Super cash.
Trainers. He is not John Galliano, is he? You know.
No, it's actually, I think that comes across in all the interviews that he didn't, as you were saying earlier, Navaz, he's a prime example of a creative director who didn't expect the limelight, doesn't seek it. And, you know, that's the whole point, really, isn't it? He started behind the scenes in the atelier.
And then the clothes speak for themselves.
Yes.
You don't need to explain them. You know, you don't need the show notes to appreciate, like.
I mean, John was. I watched the Manolo Blahnik documentary on Netflix the other night, and John was saying in it that he's actually really shy, so hence his mask is the showmanship and all
And the spectacle.
Yeah. But I think that. Yeah, but then John has always been under the pressure and the limelight and to perform, and that's his story. But I think you see the ease of which, if you've worked in a house for all of this time, I think that's what you were relating to, that you know it's in your blood and then you don't have to have the bravado to try and prove yourself.
Yeah. And I think it's worth saying before because I know we'll be rounding up soon, I mentioned earlier the commercial success under Pierpaolo, the company, well, last month it was reported in the Business of Fashion that the company is looking to sell 25% on the Milan stock market this year, in the second half of this year. So it's a very interesting time for the company. This is something that they looked into 2015, and then they thought, no, let's let him settle as a sole creative director. Also, the luxury market wasn't quite so in quite such a secure place in 2015, and then now 2016 they hit 1.1 billion. So I think it's all in pretty good stead, really. Now I would love to put that to you all, the foursome, and what are your reflections on the show and reflections of what 2018 holds for the brand?
I don't know. I mean, it sounds. I think the brand's in good hands. You know, we were talking about the fashion roundabout earlier on, where everything's changing. What's the signature of this house? What, you know, who's in place now? Whereas I think this has been very seamless, and really with Valentino, you know what you're getting. And I think obviously that shows in their sort of business successes too, that it's something that works. So I imagine there's a lot of confidence in you know, in the business and in what Pierpaolo is doing. I think it was a great collection. I liked it.
Good.
I think they've worked very hard to gain some popularity, because they are not Gucci. They are not, everyone's being like, where can I buy a fake Gucci t-shirt, or the real fake looking Gucci t-shirt, you know? And so to compete, and this must have been a massive challenge for them in the last couple of years, to compete in a millennial market. And then I think that that's why we've seen the Valentino pool slides and the Valentino lipstick t-shirt and stuff like that. And I think that's been obviously been a huge concerted effort over the last, well, since Pierpaolo took over. But it seems that he, you know, he's like a swan. You know, he's obviously paddling crazy fast, but he's gliding, and I think the house is as well. And I think that by this, the show of strength here, of going away from their original aesthetic, the dreamy, floaty, Edwardian vibes, shows real promise for them. I think it does look like them, but it also doesn't look like them. I think this show has really grown them.
That's really cool.
And you?
I agree. I think he's like really, he comes across as feeling really confident in what he's delivering, and you know, everyone seems to like it. So that can only make you kind of want to do more and do good. And I guess for the brand to have a designer who probably isn't going to go anywhere else, because if you're doing well and you're doing good work and people appreciate it, hopefully you're not going to get poached by someone else at this point in time. And there's so much flux around you, so I think for them it's probably like, yes, thank God.
It's like fashion sort of open doors at the moment, you know, and obviously if they're going to float it, having this stability, it's like, don't frighten the horses, just let's do what we do really well, and you know, just keep rolling it out.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree in terms of, I think it's a very strong, lovely collection. I mean, I feel a bit subjective because I saw it before, and it was that sort of the weight, but still the big shapes. That's like a dream, I think, but still actually with the cut, and when you see it all together, you have that new sort of modern feeling to it.
Where will we
always
see it?
So it will be published on Friday in Les Echos. It's a French publication.
Are they going to put it on Instagram and stuff?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I assume so. I hope so.
I want to see them because I'm desperate to see them. I'm like, I haven't seen that.
It's 6 different houses. I went to 6 different houses. It's one dress per house.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that will be our conclusion to the week, rounding up all this beautiful glamour. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Valentino, for a truly dreamy afternoon and show. I think round of applause.